I'll just note that this keynote, rather than a traditional lecture, is made up of realisations of several interrelated performance works. These works explore the experiential capacities of small-scale and local energy sourcing in relation to the environmental and artefactual forms of light, where sound, alongside its aesthetic aspects, functions as an indicator of physical processes in actions. Using everyday materials and simple open-form performative strategies that place performer and device on an equal footing, these works both play on and with the possibilities for realising, rethinking and relating to the immaterial, energetic aspects of our environment. So I'd really love you to introduce, make some noise again for Peter Blamey, and we'll welcome him to the stage. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you for that. It's been a fantastic conference. I'm sure you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. It's very exciting and humbling for me to be here and to present this keynote that's not a keynote for you today. Big thanks to Charles and Pia and all of the organisers and people behind the scenes who make this stuff happen, because it's impossible without them. Just a few, I'm not going to say too much up the front. As Charles said, mostly what I'm going to do is perform. When I got this invitation, I thought, oh, your game, you're going to ask an artist to talk about themselves. I mean, 4 days won't be quite long enough. So luckily, the instruction was, no, do your thing. Come and do your thing, and we'll talk about that. That's much more my world anyway. So I'm going to present some performance works and some video works. To kind of have a bit of a breadth of some of what I do, what my world is. Most of this work, because I'm working predominantly today with light, different forms of light, it's going to be largely in the dark. But there will be light, there'll be different things happening. When you see your work on the screen, the work is up there. I'm not doing anything interesting down there while it's happening. It's just it doing its thing. So don't be too concerned about that. And this, for the NIMErs who are also Zoomers or on the internet, this may not be a great experience for you, but just if you can't see anything, just imagine something really cool is happening. All right. The set's going to start very quiet, without the PA, and then it'll get progressively noisier. I mean, you've read the thing, right? I'd also like to point out my smart aleck use of the initials there in the title of the work. But sorry about that. All right. Well, with no further ado, Pia, if you would do the honours. just before we... That's a bit of a laundry list of some of the works that kind of got worked through in that process. Just if that's any help. A couple of those things I've never done in front of an audience before, so that was nice to have the opportunity to do that. I mean, why not risk it during a keynote, right? Yeah. That's a perfect opportunity. What can I say about my own work? Oh, I guess one of the things that becomes obvious is that there may be a big difference between the materials I'm using to some degree and some of the approaches that I've chosen. But I guess the reason why I am here doing this is the entanglement issue, the idea of entanglement. It may not be clear to you, but it feels clear to me the way that my work is a response very much to my surroundings and my conditions, the environment, culture, and the context that I find myself in on a day-to-day basis. Any of the video you saw there was shot, well, one of them was filmed on my balcony out of my bedroom, the other one is just down the road. You know, it's all very local. And a number of the materials that I'm using here are foraged materials that were found within a couple of kilometres radius of my house. All these remote controls, most of the batteries I'm using were found on the ground. They're not bought or anything. A lot of the cabling is either found or reused or comes from some other project or was appropriated from a former job or something like that, as sometimes happens. Some of the smaller solar cells came out of those little lights that people put in their gardens that they then get trodden and broken, so they're plentiful to come by quite easily. So there's a big, even this lamp, not the globe itself, but everything else there I found in the street. So there's a very big, and that saucer, and that, what's it called? Jug, there, the jug. Oh, everything really, except the laser. The laser is the cheapest laser you can buy at Bunnings. It's like 20 bucks. It's terrible. When you read the product reviews, that people say things like, does not shine in a straight line. It's really unhelpful. Perfect for me though. That's fine. So that's a big part of, so there is definitely, in amongst the idea of entanglement for me is obviously a tilt towards environmentalism and reuse and rethinking ideas about what it is that energy conceived in a bunch of different ways. For me, artists often, as my colleague Douglas Kahn says, artists often say energy this, energy that. For me, energy is a physical thing. The metaphysical overlay can come from other people. I'm all right with that. That's fine. But for me, it's a real thing that I try and get at in this work. But I don't do that in a way that sacrifices all the other things that I'm interested in, like the ecological aspects and environmental aspects of working with the materials that I have and the things that they're capable of doing. So over the years, my work has become more and more energy efficient. Hence, at the start, I've been increasingly trying to work out ways to perform without the traditional edifice of the PA or sound system or whatever, and moving increasingly towards using a tiny amplifier, half the size of a shoebox, to do performances with. And using things like the piezo buzzers, which of course are very energy efficient, so they can, make a high enough pitch noise in this room, and you can hear it even though it's 100 people listening to a buzzer going, may not be very edifying, but the other side of that is the energy saving part of the equation. So all these things are these are the preoccupations behind my work in a lot of ways. I guess you could also see, particularly in those two video works, I have a big attachment to trying to perform with aspects of the weather, of our climate. Of the first of the video works there is a direct response to the phenomenon of lightning. Now, lightning often appears, Everyone probably knows the trick of catching lightning on AM radio. You will hear it as crackle, you know, the sound of the electromagnetism from these huge events happening out in the world, travels at, you know, at the speed of radio, at the speed of light, and can be heard on the radio. But that made me think, surely there's enough light travelling in that distance that you'll be able to pick it up on just a domestic solar cell. And then if you amplify that, what is that? And so you end up in this strange situation where you hear the sound of lightning before you hear the sound of thunder, so you kind of reverse that. But it gives you a very immediate sense of the liveliness of lightning as an energetic event. And then there's this other thing, right? So the solar panel on the top of your house is not just being energized by the sun, it's being micro-energized by flashes of lightning, or indeed any kind of light at all. So that is not another big interest of mine. So transduction is obviously a major part of where I'm at, how I think about what it is that things do, the way that energies can be performed and realized in a kind of hands-on, low-tech, found equipment kind of way. Transduction becomes this kind of pivotal point where I rethink it's a point of realization where one energy form gets turned into another. It's not like you are, from my perspective, people have lots of different perspectives on this. Occasionally I will say to people that you do this, and it's like, oh, it's the sound of light. Well, it's like, well, I wouldn't be heading down that particular philosophical route. My take on it would be more that what transduction gives you access to is a range of factors, a range of gradients, a range of qualities in one source that might be able to be realized in another. And that process of realizing in both senses, in making happen and kind of thinking about it, gives you access to the idea that these conversion things are real and that they can take place and tell you things about environmental conditions wherever you are and that sort of thing. Anyway, let me shut up and you ask me a question and I'll just talk more if anyone has anything they'd like to ask. Sure. Feel free. What is the laser doing? These are great questions. So there's two works that involve laser, the two bottom ones there. You can read. There's a laser there. So in the work, all the laser is doing is being on. So the work consists of what is effectively like backyard garage interferometry. So there's a laser at one end pointing at a little solar panel, and then the solar panel is just being amplified. That's the end point of pretty much everything I just showed you. I just did then is it's just being amplified at the end. There's no effects, there's no processing. I didn't even bother to EQ anything because it sounded good enough. It's like, it is what it is. That's, whatever it is, it's doing it now. It's one of my ethos. So then, in both of those works, like the first one where I was lasering the soluble aspirin coming up, it's the bubbles that are created in the water scatter the laser. And it's that the rhythm or the rate of that scattering interrupts it, so it creates a kind of discontinuity in the beam of laser. So effectively it's like a really rough-ass digital kind of thing, surprisingly. And then the other work where I had the laser come in the other direction is exactly the same setup. Laser pointing at solar panel, which is amplified. The bottle just kind of, it scatters the laser, but in a more rumbly kind of way. And it disrupts it, and so we get that very, that sort of sound that is reminiscent of thunder, like it. And so it says something about not only that process happening, but kind of the embodied energy of a glass bottle. That any glass bottle that looks to be straight, if you do that to it, you'll hear how rumbly the surface actually is. So this is the best of a number of bottles I've found recently that sounded the most rumbly. Yeah. So yeah, but that process is the same. The only one that isn't that process in a lot of ways was the work using the remote controls, which were these are just a collection of remote controls. I have a few. Oh, hang on. Let me show you this work. Excuse me. So, like, I own a few remotes. Remotes are becoming an increasingly kind of rare thing in the world, it seems. You know, once upon a time, they were the hand control, invisible control unit du jour that everyone had to have, and everything you bought came with one. Now, when people move house, they'll see me and they go, ah, and they give me like a bag full of remote controls that they've found in a drawer or something like that, and some of them work and some of them don't. But all of them are, you know, encoded projectors of infrared energy. And you know, and they're encoded with digital pulse codes that, I mean, about 70% of the remotes I've ever listened to sound the same, and then the rest of the ones, the kind of ones that sound like the way these ones do, that are more interesting. But I've done a bunch of performances where you project them at a solar panel, and the panel is, of course, amplified. But I thought I would mix it up and do the other trick, which is to listen to them on AM radio, which sort of puts that, it brings radio in, another redundant, increasingly redundant media for a lot of us. Anyone who's my age, I don't know, I grew up glued to the radio, and it's something that I only listen to now in that form. Where I used to listen to, you know, the broadcast on the radio, now the useful thing to me is the gaps, because I can get in there and you can broadcast your AM radio yourself. But any of the other works, yeah, they're variations on that same idea to a degree. Anyway, yeah.
So you kind of hinted at that some of the older bits of tech are more interesting to you, or at least you've had more kind of productive explorations with. But like, for instance, solar panels are getting more efficient. Like, are there any aspects of the found technologies that you are kind of more interested in as the technology kind of gets better and they become more interesting to play with?
Well, that's a really good question. I think, well, in some ways I am interested, but also I've kind of made a decision that I'm not purchasing any more materials. It's not that I own a lot of stuff, but I own lots of bits and pieces. Most of my works really start with a question about something that I then try and work out how to get a response out of myself and the things that I work with and see if that happens. So it's like, I kind of decided if I've got a difficult question about quantum physics and I can't work it out with a remote control and a radio, then I'm never going to work it out. But inevitably, as solar technology changes, I'd like to keep abreast of that to some degree. It is interesting that around the time that I first started shining things that were not sunlight at a solar panel and going, ooh, that works, was the same time that what's the name of the UNSW lab? I can't remember. Anyway, UNSW Solar Lab were developing these multi-layered panels that responded to different types of light. So at the time that I was trying to tip more into a panel that was designed to basically have a spike around about the middle of the visual spectrum, they were looking to the wider edges of the things that I was interested in as well. Like, so the idea that, a solar panel is really very responsive to infrared. So, yeah, we'll see.
Hi, I love how you were talking about absorption on the level of sound, and I wonder if that shows up on the level of form, or how you frame these environments you come across through time.
I'm not sure. I'm sure it does, and I'm not sure how I can answer that question in the beautiful way that you've just put it. But yeah, no, it's a really big part of my thinking. It's for a lot of times, particularly in a lot of the literature within the humanities of the last little while, transduction tends to get mobilized as a kind of metaphor around change, or as, you know, it's one more synonym for not this word but that word, but we're just talking about change or difference or whatever. But I really think about it from a practical and a literal physical perspective. But when I conceptualise it, I've often been taken to conceptualising it around the figure of mimesis and alterity, which goes back to, you know, this shows that when I was an undergrad, I read Michael Talsig's book of that title, but where he talks about the nature of the idea of things are the same but different. So, you know, the idea that, you know, and that so I'm not expecting some kind of sameness to come out of that process. Really what I want is the other bit. I want the difference part. So that tends to be how I think about those things. But yeah. But now I will think about it the way you just put it.
I have time for one more question.
Oh, sure.
Not a question, but a provocation.
Excellent.
Look for CD players and DVD players. I've done a lot with their little motors, but I think you could do things with the plate.
Oh yeah. Well, in some ways, the bottle spinning around in a laser, I mean, that's a CD player. that may be as close as I get. But yeah. My other big if I'd thought about this more, I might have brought one of those things that are ubiquitous to find in the world these days because printer cartridges are so expensive, is to find flatbed scanners. So I've done a lot of work with flatbed scanners and used those. So that's my other toy, I guess, the thing that is a technological thing, but it's really about the fact that it makes light and that makes a noise or that other things happen. But yeah, no CD players, maybe. I mean, there's plenty of them around. I'll go on.
Have you explored the handheld scanners that are portable?
I'd love if someone's got one they could. That would be really cool. Yeah. No, I mean, you know, if your beggars can't be choosers, I guess. If I find one in the street, it'll go straight home. But yeah. But mind you, I have taken flatbed scanners out because what do you know, a scanner works upside down and vertically in any other direction. So I've taken scanners out and image bits of road and stuff like that just for the hell of it. But you get home and you go, I could have just taken a photo. Anyway. But every scanner, I guess, is as I've worked out, is as mobile as its power source. So, but a handheld one would be pretty cool.
Someone will just have to throw one in your yard.
Exactly. Yeah, I should put my own address up there.
We could do a throwing activity right now.
And has anyone got a light pen for Sam?
Folks, Peter, thank you so much for the beautiful performance.
My pleasure.
And your thoughts on everything. And unfortunately, we have to stop right now. I know there's a lot of more questions. We can continue discussing with you in the foyer in our break. Our next session starts at 4 o'clock. I'm going to need to shoo everyone out so that the PA guys can come and pick up the gear. But let's just have one more round of applause for Peter.